This is the epicenter of oil, West Texas.
Oh, wow.
The United States is currently producing more oil than anywhere in history, and doing so despite its pledge to reduce emissions.
It's being pumped right here from deep underground and sent across the country and around the world.
Even though their statements may differ.
And we will drill, baby, drill. We're going to drill, baby, drill.
We should move more rapidly to renewable energy, to wind and solar.
All recent U.S. governments have pursued policies of drilling more oil. Proponents say it's good business, that it creates a lot of jobs and keeps living costs low for taxpayers, and that it's important for securing U.S. energy independence.
I'm here to see what's going on at the center of it all.
And to find out whether those claims are true. And what I found? A whole lot of pickup trucks, a situation more complicated than I'd ever imagined.
Oh, look!
Yeah, I'm kind of scared of these things.
And a quiet problem that some claim could bankrupt the industry. It was unseasonably hot on the drive to West Texas, close to the New Mexico border. Random oil wells in use and abandoned dotted the landscape.
Ah, look, there's some right there.
In August of 2024, Texas produced around 5 million barrels of oil per day, about the production capacity of Canada.
Nearly half the oil produced by the entire country comes from this state.
So, oil ripples throughout the entire economy here.
Where we're headed, the University of Texas owns millions of acres of land, and the more oil is pumped, the more it adds to its endowment.
Museums around the state also live from oil money. That's including the Petroleum Museum in the city of Midland, heart of oil country. Everything here sits on top of the Permian Basin, an oil field that stretches from West Texas to New Mexico. There's a bunch of old oil equipment here because Texas has been at the center of U.S. oil booms for decades.
And all of these behind me are old drilling rigs. They date back to the 1920s.
They're the first step in oil extraction, drilling a well. Then come the pumps.
Oh, there are some pumps we can go look at over there, actually. So when they first hit oil, it basically explodes out of the ground due to changes in pressure. But after a while, it doesn't really explode so much anymore, and you have to actually pump it. These are the pumps that do exactly that.
But it's not a simple process. To hear more about it, we spoke to Brian Grant, the executive director.
The oil is actually trapped within layers of rock that are in these different layers of strata. So we have to not only drill, but then we have to crack the rock.
People have been cracking the rock to get at that oil for more than a century, mostly with explosives.
And after that, they're going to inject the sand that will hold the fractures open.
This sand, along with water and chemicals, is a key component of modern fracking. Another is horizontally drilled wells, which are more productive than vertical ones. Since fracking took off, the U.S. has increased production by nearly threefold. It's been a part of every well junior field engineer Hollis Eubanks has worked on. Hollis has worked in oil and gas for nearly a decade and directly in oil extraction for the last 5 years.
We will send in, we call it a gun, and it's just an explosive tube barrel, and we'll perforate holes.
So you do the explosion.
Yes, ma'am.
We saw the explosion in the museum.
Hollis took us around to some work sites near the city.
Why did you start working in the oil and gas?
The big pull towards it was, it's money. It's a lot of money. I know guys who don't even have a high school diploma that make 6 figures a year. It's hard to go back to a normal life just because it's one of those things that once it gets in your blood, it's kind of addictive.
It's a lot of money for the industry, too. This major oil and gas fund is at its second highest point since its creation. Chevron CEO Mike Wirth's salary rose 12% in 1 year to $26.5 million in 2023. Some of this money does stay in Texas. In terms of wealth, the University of Texas is second only to Harvard, and the industry paid the state over $26 billion in taxes in 2023.
The money has went up, but as far as it feels like it's a little bit harder now since everything else is just higher.
So there's more to the story than the oil boom creating many good jobs.
This right here is going to be an active job site.
That's an active job site, okay.
Maintenance side of things. These guys work in rain, snow, heat, cold, everything. There's a lot of sacrifice with it. I think a lot of people are hesitant to do that.
Recently, there have been massive layoffs in the industry, some of which have been triggered by fracking-induced oversupply. On top of that, new technology means fewer workers in wells are necessary to keep up production. We reached out to companies around Midland to ask what this means for future job creation, but never heard back. Hollis says more people are leaving than he's ever seen.
But does that mean that Texas is less strict?
A lot of people just go back home and work at whatever they can find. A lot of guys I know have left and operate cranes now for wind turbines and solar.
He's considering switching as well because those jobs offer more time at home. Nationwide, renewable energy jobs are growing twice as fast as the rest of the energy sector and the U.S. economy. Another more complicated claim is that more drilling will mean U.S. energy independence. For raw crude oil to be used, it's often turned into petroleum products like gasoline. This is done in refineries around the country, many of which are in Texas. But most U.S. refineries were built before the fracking boom, which turns out a different type of oil. The last full-capacity refinery in the U.S. was built in 1977. This means a lot of fracked crude oil is exported, mostly to Europe and China. The U.S. then imports different oil, mostly from Canada. So the oil boom has decreased imports slightly, but the system isn't set up for the U.S. to wean itself off imports entirely. And more drilling doesn't directly equal lower prices, as proponents claim. Even though it does play a role, it's just one piece of a complicated global puzzle. Moreover, companies want the price of oil to be high. That way they can offer competitive salaries, invest in new infrastructure, and theoretically plug old wells.
That's just as important as drilling, because you have to, when you're done with something, you got to make sure that it's not going to come back and haunt you in the future, which has happened to a lot of places around here.
Those unplugged wells are quietly causing massive damage and could seriously threaten oil companies' bottom lines. They can leach chemicals into the groundwater and methane into the air. Methane emissions from only around 1,000 U.S. wells have been studied, but some individual wells have been found to emit as much methane as 4,000 cars in 1 year. And companies are leaving taxpayers to deal with the problem.
We're headed outside Midland to some ranches that have abandoned wells on their properties, and they're causing big problems for the people who live there. Hi, Piggy.
Hi!
Hi, Amanda. Nice to meet you.
I'm sorry.
Hey, nice to meet you.
Like many in the state, Laura Briggs has deep ties to the oil industry.
My grandpa worked for Enco, Humboldt, Esso, Exxon. My dad worked for Exxon.
But partially due to the fracking boom, she's living with ticking time bombs.
This well here was one of the old orphaned wells that blew August 1st.
Blue, like
It
blew up?
blew produced water everywhere. And produced water is the wastewater that's left over after they drill an oil and gas well. So we don't even know what's in it. It's their trade secret. What they frack with is what they're injecting underground that's causing these old wells to make trouble.
The produced water got on Laura's animals, and when she touched them, it felt like drain cleaner on her skin. Other than causing these old wells to blow, those wastewater injections can also cause earthquakes. Another well on her property hasn't blown yet.
Sometimes the pressure is really bad and sometimes it's really low. My neighbors across the river have some plugged wells and they say they weep. Like sometimes they're wet around it and sometimes they're not. No, Mr. Guys.
Many wells are in rural areas, which makes them easier to ignore. Laura has to wait for this well to blow before the Railroad Commission, which oversees oil and gas in Texas, will plug it. Hawk Dunlap is one person drawing attention to this issue. He fixes problematic wells for a living and noticed how big the problem with abandoned wells really was.
So this is a Chevron well that was plugged in 2010 by Chevron. We've excavated it right at about a month ago. So what you see here is the remnants of the well that's supposed to be plugged. As you can see, there's crude oil leaking outside of it. This is crude oil, live crude. It's got gas in it. We tested the oil. It's also got produced water in it. And 2 years ago, we started digging up wells, and the first 7 we dug up were leaking. They were like this.
All of them?
The first 7 that we did.
Wow.
Since then, we've dug up on this ranch 100, and I would say 95 of them are leaking. And the other 5, I'm not for certain that they're not.
There are 8,375 unplugged wells on the official Texas list, and an estimated 783,000 inactive wells in the state. That doesn't include improperly plugged wells like this one. Properly closing them is going to be expensive.
So you're looking at Chevron having to pay $500,000 to $1 million for every well like this.
For every well?
Sure.
There are state and federal cleanup programs, but they don't have nearly enough money.
I'm going to suspect that the majority of the wells that had already been plugged are going to have to be revisited at some point.
I mean, that's like trillions of dollars.
Yeah. You can bankrupt an oil company.
Whoa.
Sarah Stogner is also publicizing the issue. She and Hawk are planning to take Chevron to court over these abandoned wells.
I tell people it's kind of like a 12-step program. There's like the first step is admitting that there's a problem. If you were to ask anyone behind closed doors off the record, everyone would admit that this is a problem. But what will they say on the record? We've plugged more wells under the orphan wells program, and we've beat our legislative goals, and we're great, rah, rah, go team. But we've dug up, 4 of those, and they're all leaking.
Between badly plugged wells like these and the damage done, Sarah thinks the companies have too many liabilities for future revenue to cover. Still, she and Hawk aren't against the industry.
Cut my wrist, I'm going to bleed crude oil. I've got a daughter that wants to come up the same way. We're not anti-oil, we're just anti-half-ass.
You feel the same way?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I was like, you took the words out of my mouth.
There's obviously like a lot of wells that are already in operation and they're producing oil.
Yeah.
And like, is there anything that people can do with those wells to not have this situation in the future?
Yeah, you properly abandon them when you stop using them. And when they start to exhibit signs of mechanical integrity failures, you quickly address them. And if you can't fix them, you abandon the well and you bury it and you pay for the funeral.
Do you think that's happening?
No.
Sarah and Hawk even found a spot on the property with oil in the groundwater.
We are subsidizing the cleanup. The money that the industry pays in taxes then gets turned around and used to clean up their mess. And Hawk's expression is like wiping your butt with a hula hoop.
You just keep coming around.
A major stated reason behind more drilling is that it keeps costs low for taxpayers. But the hidden costs of plugging old wells and cleaning up toxic chemicals are not being calculated in. And with continued reliance on oil imports, the industry claim of energy independence doesn't match with reality. A study by the oil-rich University of Texas found that the state could get to net zero emissions by 2050, and the economy would actually grow. That's partially because of the strong growth in jobs and renewables. Texas is known for its energy, and oil and gas are deeply connected to people in the state. But despite the promises made, the industry isn't living up to its claims.
If you liked this video, let us know. If you didn't, let us know why. Either way, don't forget to subscribe. We have new videos every Friday.